how is it going? In today's video, let's discuss what are the most typical mistakes that you are doing or you did in the past when doing user surveys. Let's do it. And by the way, for those of you who doesn't know me, my name is Anfisa and I help people to transition to UX design studies. Or at least my goal is to make this path more shortcutted to you and help you to avoid the typical mistakes that UX designers do when they just get started. And by the way, if you have any questions or you yourself transition to UX design, make sure to check out my online course right below in the description. So okay, without any further ado, let's focus on the video. And in today's video, as I've mentioned, we will discuss the typical user survey mistakes that you're doing. And for this, I took a survey of my student that she was doing for her UX research studies. And to give you a little bit of the context, she was doing a redesign of the mobile app that helps mountain climbers to plan the road and also to not get lost during the actual expeditions. So in prior to the survey, she did a secondary research, she formed the hypothesis, and she had two goals for this survey. The first goal for this survey was to actually screen the people, so to find only the targeted users in order to then take them to the qualitative research and conduct user interviews. And the second goal was to validate her initial hypothesis that she formed during the secondary research. Alright? Okay, no more talk, let's dive into the actual survey and see what mistakes she possibly did. Yay! Alrighty, so here is the survey of my student, and I actually want to start on a good note because there are many good things about the survey, as well as a couple of the questions that I would definitely rephrase. And of course, let's go through them one by one. But again, let's start with the good note. So the first thing I really like about the survey that she actually cared to think about the reward for the user's time, for the lead's time. If one of the goals for your survey is to do the screener and actually filter people who do not fit your target user criteria, then you need to make sure you motivate people with some sort of a reward after they're doing it. So in this case, the student actually did a great job and she offered a $50 gift card for Canada and US respondents because she knew that this is her target users. And this is very, very good start. And also she mentioned how much time it takes, what particularly is the goal of this survey, and how she will use this information in future. So always make sure that people understand what they are doing it for, and also if this information will be published somewhere, then they need to know where to expect seeing the results. Okay, the next thing is, obviously, she separated the survey into two blocks, page 1 and page 2. So I really like that she's actually doing a screener on the first page. So taking the requirements that these people need to fulfill. Let's say they need to be a climber and they need to use this app. So if people don't use this app or they are not a climbers, they are not valid respondents. So they don't need to proceed doing this survey and don't need to spend their time filling all the answers if they are not valid, and basically their answers will not be counted, right? And obviously, after you don't fill some of those answers that needs to be filled correctly, you do not proceed to the next page and you basically receive the message, thank you for trying. And basically, let's just pretend that we're trying to fill the survey. Are you a climber? Yes. Do you use the mountain app? Yes. Great, let's proceed. Okay, success. I've got to the second page and I'm looking to be a relevant person to this survey. So I'm gonna start answering the questions about the app one by one. And let's start with the first question. How often do you visit the Mountain Project forum? So this app obviously has the forum where people are able to ask questions and receive answers to the question they have. And I must say that I like this question because it's not leading and it's not asking you, hey, do you miss so much information that you have to go to the Mountain Project forum? It doesn't ask so straightforwardly, and it actually asks, how often do you use? And obviously for us, it means that if people say never, that will validate a hypothesis that people don't miss information on the app. They don't need to go to the Mountain Project forum. So that's a very good question to actually validate your hypothesis. Good example. Let's proceed to the next questions. When you are on site, do you sometimes feel like you could use more information from the app in order to find a specific route? And in general, I think I also like this question because it will allow me to receive the P chart of answers, and that will show me the trend if people actually need more information on the app. So basically I will receive a P chart with 50-50 yes or no, or maybe 95 yes and 5% no. So this is a good way for me to start validating that pain is there, that people are missing information. This is just a good confirmation for my hypothesis that I did during my secondary research when I was reading, let's say, reviews or testimonials for different other forums. Okay, so that's a good question. And the next question is when I already start seeing some issues, or not issues, but it could be rephrased. So If you answered yes to the previous question, can you precise which information would be helpful in order to find a road more easily? So this question is actually not bad, but I would definitely try to make it more relatable to the people, because when you just need to give your information, it's a little bit hard to immediately come up with the answers, and you might end up having people who are like, at this point I don't remember, maybe I have to think about it. So you don't want people to get stuck. In order to make people unstuck, you need to ask for a case. You need to ask people to remember a situation in which they remember they were missing something in the app, in the specific context. So rephrase this question to more like, can you remember a situation when you were using the app and you missed some information so badly that it put you into trouble, or that it made you feel uncomfortable, or something was really missing there, something was painful for you? Can you remember a case? Ask people to remember a case to which they can relate, and then they could describe you the case. This could give you much more insights, because first of all, you understand in which particular steps people miss information, in which particular steps they actually need this information. So if you rephrase the question, it could actually give you a broader perspective on the problem. So that's the first suggestion I would give to this specific survey. The next question is, do you combine mountain project app with another app in order to accomplish your goal? Okay, so here I have a couple of the suggestions for this question. And the first suggestion is to change the framing. So you said, do you remember combining mountain project app with another app? When you say another app, you already specify what exactly solution you are looking for substitution. You're actually restricting people to think only in terms of the apps, and they will start remembering all other apps, maybe Google Maps, maybe some Maps.me, whatever. You ask people to specify the apps, which is a little bit restricting. And I would suggest you to think a little bit outside the box and to not focus only on the App Store solutions, but also to think about other solutions. I would rephrase it to something like, do you combine mountain project app with any other solutions or maybe ways? Because in this way you can understand how else people are achieving their goals. Maybe they buy a book, maybe they actually use the paper maps, or maybe they even ask people who are also taking the roads. Maybe there are much more ways to accomplish the goal than just find another app. And you just don't want to miss out those ways. You need to get the full broad picture on how people are doing things right now. Because if people will tell you, hey, I'm actually buying the paper maps, this will tell you what people are more comfortable doing. So what habits they are actually having. So maybe in the future, during the conceptualizing stage, you can use this paper-like map as a reference, as an image, or we'll see how you can use it, but at least you know what people are comfortable doing, and you have sort of a more natural way to find a solution to their problem. And actually the good case here, if you remember Tinder solution, when people were using only dating websites where they need to fill their forms, profiles, and then they start looking for people and go through the pages. Basically, Tinder founders realized that it's a very long process to just find a match, and this is actually a friction that makes the process much more longer. Whereas if you look at the real world, where just people going on the street and sort of, we all evaluate the looks of each other, right? So when we go on the street and we see somebody's attractive, you're like, so you first always evaluate how people look. And they took this natural habit and digitalized it so that you can evaluate people by their look from one side. Yes or no, swipe left or right, right? That's why it's very important to understand what people are actually doing in the real life world. Not always people would have digital solutions already established online, okay? And the second suggestion for this question is actually regarding the word goal. So when you're saying accomplish your goal, you're actually giving the people to assume what kind of goal, to sort of self-interpret what kind of goal you mean. Is the goal is to put the road on the map, or is the goal is to plan my road? What exactly is the goal? People would assume they know what's the goal, and each of these respondents will take it differently. So you probably don't want to create a question that will imply ambiguous answers with different assumptions. And actually this refers me to the next question. So the next question is, if you answered yes to the previous question, can you precise what is the other app and what is the feature you use it on? I would actually consider merging those two questions together, because I can see from the question that your goal is to understand what other apps people are using to achieve their goals. And this goal doesn't require you to receive the pictured sort of trend to validate that people are using other apps, because if they do, they will actually answer to you here what other apps they are using and for which particular need. So What if you just rephrase those two phrases and sort of create one question out of those two? And instead of asking, if you answered yes, can you precise what other apps you're using? Again, put people into the context. Try to ask, okay, remember a case when you needed something and you couldn't find it on Mountain Project app. What was that one thing? And what app you actually used? What solution you actually used in order to accomplish your goal? And so again, you will put people into the context, asking them to remember about the situation when they were missing something. And they will describe you the case, and they will also tell you how they actually solved it, with which particular other cases they solved it. Was it the way? Was it, again, the feature? So I would just consider merging those questions, and maybe even consider merging these questions with the previous questions. So this way you can actually get much more answers. And if they solve their problem with the other app and specific features in those app, they will definitely mention it there. So yeah, instead of 3 questions, probably I will consider merging them into one big question, more open-ended question. And of course, I will make sure it's mandatory question to reply. If people are still motivated to fulfill the survey, they will tell you a story, and it will be mandatory for them to write those story up, okay? Let's proceed to the next question. And the question sounds like, on a scale from 1 to 5, how comfortable would you be to add information about the climbing area, a new climbing area? Okay, so this is probably the most problematic question in this particular survey. And there are 2 essential problems with this question. The first one is the scale. Usually you would use scale from 1 to 5 or from 1 to 10, whatever, to evaluate existing experience, something that people could relate to, something they could remember, something that they've experienced, and they could tell you what was good or bad. Whereas in this case, you're actually asking to evaluate something that they didn't experience. It's like asking someone to evaluate a rocket space traveling where they've never been in the rocket space, and they cannot tell you was it good or bad or comfortable or not comfortable. So like, again, you need to make sure that if you're using evaluation, only use it once people can remember using it and can tell you was it okay or not okay. And here, you're actually trying to evaluate a feature, a new feature that you want to add. So you're asking, how comfortable would you be to add information about new climate area? And that brings me to the second point about this question. It seems like our goal for this question is to evaluate, will people actually use this feature? Will people actually add information about the new climbing area? And again, I think the framing is not correct in this case, because to understand if people will do it, you need to understand what's the motivation for them to be doing it. The question is actually, why would somebody add the new climbing area information? What will motivate them to do this? And your goal would be to understand what would be this motivation. What would be the reward for people for the investment you ask them to do? And the investment is adding information, and reward is something that motivates me to add this information to your app, okay? So there are 2 core components here. Motivation, why would you do this? Why would you invest in this app? And the second core component is, what will I receive in return? What will be the reward for my investment in this app? And actually, since we're talking about the motivation, I would like to suggest here 2 frameworks for you to consider if you want to learn more about it. The first framework is called Hook Model. There is the book by Nir Eyal. You definitely need to read this book. And this book actually shares the framework based on the behavior human psychology. So it takes into consideration why would people do things and what will motivate them to do things, in which cases, in which contexts, in order to get information you need from the people to the app. So in a hook model, there are 4 steps, but we need to focus only on 2 steps in this case. And the first step is, what action do you want me to do? What the investment? So investment is a step. And the second action is reward. What do I receive for this investment? And usually there are 3 types of categories for rewards, which Nir Eyal actually observed and put them into patterns. And the first category is reward of the self, so something from me that will help me to progress and become better at something. Another one is treasure hunt. So from our past, we still have a treasure hunt crave, and we want to collect things. And the last type of a reward is the tribe reward. So when it's more about social context and maybe leadership boards and stuff like that. So there are 3 types of the rewards that you can consider before writing this question. And another framework that I will recommend you in terms, again, if you have similar case in your current UX study, is to look into the Pirate Metrics by Growth Hacking Framework, because there are like 5 steps, and we need to focus on the referral step. So usually when you do this framework in the referral step, you need to ask people in the survey, what is this one thing that you cannot live without in this app? What is the biggest value that this app provides you? What is this one thing that solves the problem like no one else does? And when you understand the key motivation, the key value why people are using this app, you understand what you can give, What is this actual key and gem value that you can provide to the people and ask something in return? So what's this reward? And people will tell you themselves what they appreciate this app for. And so let's come back to the question, actually. How would we rephrase this question in order to make it fulfill our goal? So again, the goal for us to understand what will motivate people to contribute information to the app. And for this question, I would rather ask something like, what's the most important thing about this app that you cannot live without? What's the feature or the value that you appreciate this app for that you cannot live without? And here also let me give you a quick example. So you know the Dropbox, right? It's a cloud service, storage sort of service. And what they did, they realized that people value their product for extra space. So they cannot live without extra space. They always need extra space. And basically right now, once they reach the limit of the free trial space, they need to buy more space. So what they did, they actually said like, hey, share this app with your friend, and for each invited friend, we will give you a free space. So they ask for an action, share it with your friend for a value they cannot live without, for extra space that they actually provide, okay? So I hope this example gives you a little bit more understanding of how do you ask for people motivation for the action you want them to do, okay? And without any extra ado, let's proceed. The last question I want to cover today is, would you like to track your climbing progress? Where, what, and how you climbed? Yes, no. So also, I would say this question is wrong, and I would definitely consider reframing this question. Simply because when you just want to validate a feature with yes or no, people will always, majority of the cases, they will tell you yes. And the problem is just that people are nice, and most likely they will tell you, yes, it's great, it's nice to have, but when you spend your time developing the feature and then it appears that nobody uses this, it's just because it was nice to have, but it's not a core thing. It's not a core feature. It's not a problem that they want to solve. It's just a nice thing to have. And for you, it's a problem because you can spend a lot of time building that nice things to have that nobody will value and actually need in their routine. It will be just there. Sometimes they will use it, but it's not critical. It's not so important and needed in the user's routine. And basically the problem with this question is that we designers, we just want a shortcut. We just want yes or no without understanding the depths, without understanding the thinking process, what's inside of our users. And without understanding this, there is no shortcut to innovation. You will just need to build a lot of things that will appear irrelevant. You will learn from your mistakes, but again, you will not do the proper user research, understanding people. And just as an example here, I like the quote by Henry Ford, who said that if we would ask people what they want, they would just tell us we want a faster horse, which would never bring us to the world that we have today. We would never come up with the car concept because people would just want a faster horses, right? So I would definitely consider to think deeper. And there's also another framework that I'm using in order to understand what actually we need to build. And for this, I suggest you to focus on 3 goals if you want to understand what's the next critical feature we need to build for the app. And here are those 3 things. So the first thing you need to understand from your people, you need to ask about the goals. What goals are you trying to achieve? What are the jobs that needs to be done in your routine? So that's when you establish the context. The second question or the second thing you need to figure out is current processes. So if people have goals, they have things to achieve, they probably somehow already have works around it. They probably already have some processes that allows them to achieve those goals. So by asking this, you can also understand what are the most comfortable ways for people to achieve goals. What are the workarounds? Can we make those workarounds more efficient? Can we make it digital? Can we make it faster, cheaper, whatever? So you understand the current habits, current processes. And the last thing you need to figure out is the problems or opportunities. So here you also need to ask about remembering case when they have a problem. Maybe the current workaround was too slow that they couldn't make it in time. So just ask people to remember cases where the current workaround wasn't good enough and they had a problem from this. So only when you focus on these 3 questions, what's the goal, what's the process, and what were the problems you occurred, you can actually figure out what's the space for you for innovation, what is the most critical thing you need to focus on, and what's the next thing we need to develop in our app to still meet the market needs. Okay, I hope that makes much more sense to you. Instead of just asking yes or no, please go deeper, please understand the motivation behind it, and please understand how can you reflect current routine into the new, efficient, better routines, and of course first by validating that the actual problem exists there. Okay, so that's it, and let me quickly rewind the key takeaways from this video. The first recommendation is don't limit people to ask only what other apps are you using. Ask what other ways or solutions you're using in order to achieve your goals. Second takeaway, use evaluation questions only when you want people to evaluate existing thing, existing experience. Don't ask to evaluate something that doesn't even exist yet. Third takeaway, frame the questions correctly. If you want to understand what's the motivation, then ask what's the most critical feature or value this app provides you, so that you can actually understand what you can give in return for people's investment, okay? Fourth recommendation for today, read the book Hooked by Muriel, or also dig into growth hacking pirate metric framework to understand a little bit better about behavior psychology and how do you better frame your questions in order to get information you're looking for. And the final, fifth takeaway is never ask straightforward question, yes or no. Do you like it? Do you want it? Do you need it? Instead, ask these three questions. What's the goal? What's the current process? What are the problems you're occurring with this process? Okay? I hope that makes sense to you. Please let me know if you have other recommendations or best practices for the survey, and let's discuss them in the comments down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching it through, and I'll see you guys on the next videos. Bye!